And the other thing I wanted to ask, this is more of just prying because you might not even have an answer here, or I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it. I'm trying to get more information from people. I've actually talked to someone who works on the WebKit team, and they just tell me I can't talk about it. I'm like, which is expected. But now that this whole thing in the EU is going on, and they're planning to drop the WebKit requirement on iOS, are you guys looking at that? Is there anything you can talk about regarding that? Um, I don't know if it's been pretty much confirmed that Google is internally working on Chromium for iOS. So I don't know if you're also kind of on that boat, or if you're planning to stay with WebKit, or if it's way too early to even tell what's going to happen on iOS.
Actually, the reason why our iOS version has taken so long is we've been waiting on this to change, to be frank.
So there's no iOS Vivaldi?
Not yet,
Oh, I didn't know that.
actually.
I didn't know that. Okay, good to know.
So we were waiting for, basically, we didn't want to have to do it on WebKit. Eventually, we relented and said, okay, our users really, really want this. They're all asking for it. We can't wait anymore. I mean, it is a question also of resources. We're a small company in comparison to a lot of these guys. So it's a question of where do we put our resources? But we said, okay, we'll put out the iOS version. There's now a test flight available. People are very enthusiastic about that. It's WebKit based. Once we are able to do it without using WebKit, our goal would be to offer that. I mean, I'm following pretty closely what's happening with the Digital Markets Act, and I think a lot of people are maybe not realizing how big a deal it is. I think for me, it's the culmination of years where the EU has been dealing with Microsoft, Google, Apple, Facebook, and the like, basically doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And I mean, this goes all the way back to the Netscape days. And by the way, there was a browser choice at a certain time in Europe. That's because of a protest that we at Opera came with. And now this basically push that Apple has to allow other browser engines. There's also the push to allow web applications to be run as native applications on the platform.
I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen any of our content, but in like every video, I have to bring up web apps because I just love web apps. Everything I do is in the web.
And by the way, I can tell you, there's some of the first web apps were the specifications was written by Opera during my time at Opera. It used to be called widgets, but it was basically web applications in a window. I mean, that's we would particularly focusing on mobile, but also in general. But that's a little bit of a sidestep. But this is something we're excited about. Also, the ability to have multiple app stores, ability to download directly to the phone. I mean, this is just focusing on the iPhone. There is on Windows, the basically it's supposed to be equal for the browsers. So if you look at now, you want to install another browser, Microsoft will warn you multiple times on the way that are you sure you don't want to use the Microsoft recommended browser or settings or whatever? And then they provide an update to the operating system, and suddenly they've changed the default browser again. So there's a lot of things like this, but for all these companies, the new ruling is that they have to start behaving. Also with Google, I mean, in the past, we've had to deal with both at Opera and at Vivaldi being blocked from using certain services or getting recommendations. Google Docs doesn't work well with your browser. You should consider an upgrade or something like that. So it applies to a lot of the services, and I think it can make a significant difference. And I mean, it's a really good thing. So I think the EU is taking some very important steps. And one of the more important ones, as you mentioned, is the ability to use another browser core. For us, when we are building the browser available for the iOS, I mean, one thing we have to do the user interface in a different way. We would have preferred to use the same browser technology across the platforms. We did run into issues on Android, so we couldn't use web technology for Android for the user interface, not in the way that we had thought we would. And I guess we would have run into the same issues on iOS. But the issue when we're using the core, when we have Chromium, we can modify it. When we have WebKit, we can't. Basically, it's not just, okay, you have to use that code or that code. It's a question of, in the case of the WebKit on iOS, it's a black box. We can't change it. And for certain things, we need to do changes to the core. And obviously, we'd like to be able to look at what it's doing in greater detail. But in particular, for things like tracker blocker and the like, trying to get that black box to do tracker blocking in the best possible way is a significant amount of work. Now, we managed to do it, but it's extra work that we do differently on the Chromium code base, where we modify the code to do what we need. So it's those kind of things that make it a lot more difficult. So we are very excited about the ability to be using Chromium directly on iOS as well.